Roblox is a massive platform with millions of active users, a lot of them being kids, full of user-generated content such as accessories and clothing items you can purchase for your avatar. If you want to show off your newly acquired swag, one of the best ways to do so is by playing one of the many games hosted on the platform, which are created by its users. Whatever you can think of, most likely you're going to be able to find on Roblox. Like for example, you want to play a game that's inspired by One Piece? Blox Fruit's got you covered. You want to play some Sonic themed games? Just go search it up. And speaking of Sonic games on Roblox, there's an infamous one that you can no longer find due to a copyright infringement notice filed in 2021 by Sega that has ties to a dangerous criminal, and the game's name was Sonic Eclipse Online. For simplicity, I'll be referring to the aforementioned Sonic Eclipse Online as SEO. And before we talk more about the game itself as well as its creator, let's take a look at a Roblox community associated with it called the Warhead community. If we poke around on this page, we'll find many references to SEO in the comments, and going to their linked Twitter account, below their pinned tweet announcing the cessation of development for the game due to Sega's DMCA, you'll find tweets regarding SEO. Another thing you'll notice is the group holder account going by the name Warhead Management, which previously went by SEO Group Holder. This user wasn't always in charge of this page. In fact, the Warhead community wasn't even the group's original name, and taking a look at archive screenshots of this group from back in 2020 reveals that it was previously the official Sonic Eclipse Online group owned by a different user going by the name DoctorRofatnik. On July 20th, 2012, the aforementioned Roblox account was created, and in the bio we learn a little bit about him, such as how, at the time of him writing, he was a 27-year-old self-proclaimed industry visionary, a developer, a braggadocious man with many flaws, as well as how he went by the name Jaden, more specifically Jaden or Jacob Shedletsky, with said name being one of his many aliases. And I'll go more into his aliases a bit later, but to make things easy, I'll simply be referring to DoctorRofatnik as Doc. He was a pretty successful developer, having a decent amount of people working under him, some of whom were minors, and we'll talk more about that later on, as well as having been the project lead on SEO and the man behind many other successful Sonic related projects such as Sonic Simulator, all of which have been removed off the platform. Some other things that Doc had going for him that highlight his success is a Patreon page for Warhead Entertainment, which nowadays is pretty much dead, but back when his community was active, it was pulling as much as $4,800 a month. He also had an active Discord server, which will be an important part of the story later on, as well as an active YouTube audience. The channel he created, named The Gentleman Roblox, was created on May 29th, 2012, and Doc managed to amass over 10,000 subscribers, uploading various types of videos, with the most popular of the bunch being content related to SEO and his other projects such as teasers for the game, various cutscenes, tech demos, and so on. Not everything here was sunshine and rainbows though, as he was no stranger to controversy taken to his channel to address allegations levied against him, with there being two archived video examples of him responding to said allegations. The first one I'm going to briefly go over just to dip our toes into the ocean of Doc's controversial online history is his video titled Responding to Sugiyem's Allegations, posted on December 18th, 2017. Sugiyem, also known as Ferret Zinka, is a Roblox developer best known for making Pulse RP, as well as running a group called Sugiyem Studios with almost 60,000 members. Essentially what this video boils down to is Doc responding to Sugiyem's accusations that he's not due to the many racial slurs and imagery being thrown around in his Discord server. There's other things that were mentioned, but I'm not going to get into the weeds here, as I'm mainly bringing this up to highlight the fact that Doc has indeed had a history of being called out for things he said and the jokes he's made about sensitive subjects within the Discord communities he was a part of, and I now want to talk about the more controversial things he has said via Discord that eventually came to light. On September 10th, 2020, a Google Doc was created exposing a lot of questionable things Doc has said privately to various individuals, but before we dive into this document, it's important to establish all of Doc's aliases, with them of course being DoctorRofatnik, the Gentleman Roblox, Jacob or Jaden Shedletsky, and the last two usernames that I want you to keep in mind that he used on Discord are Dead Inside Mephiles and Alive Inside Mephiles. Once again, if you see any of these usernames come up, especially in the screenshots we'll be going over, remember that they all refer to the same person. Moving on, the document opens up by introducing Doc as the creator of SEO, as well as the public Discord server for the game, the invite link to which was available on the Roblox page for the game. It's also mentioned that one of the main reasons this document was created was to showcase not only insensitive comments made towards certain communities, but it was also created, quote, mostly focusing on his acts of predatory behavior, specifically towards minors. It's important to clarify though that there is no proof of Doc doing anything illegal, like sending nudes or soliciting to the victims outside of these messages, and there isn't really anything anything that could get the law involved, but what he did is not right for a 27-year-old male. Keep in mind that at the time of me writing the script for this video, the Google document is dated, having been made almost 5 years ago at this point, but I still believe it's important to go over to some degree as it reflects his irresponsibility and predatory behavior when interacting with minors, and later on this notion would reveal itself as fact in the court of law, and we'll be talking about that later on. Doc's victims requested to remain anonymous, so to identify them, the document refers to them as red, blue, and yellow. According to the document, Red was only 12 years old when Doc made contact with her in 2017. Blue was apparently 14 but lied about her age to Doc, saying that she was 18. And lastly, Yellow was only 15 years old when she first started talking to him in 2017. For the time being, I'll be focusing on Red's story, and to start things off, it's prefaced that, quote, they would DM privately on a very consistent basis around September 2017 to January 2018 just to flirt with each other. This grown adult was normalizing such behavior for a young and naive child, and even despite her being noticeably into it, encouraging someone so young to even talk about stuff like that to you or anybody, let alone privately or to a grown adult, is not okay. If you remember, it was stated that Red was only 12 years old, and Doc at the time was 24. Keep this in mind as we go through the screenshots, and again, since all victims wish to remain anonymous, Red's messages have been redacted using the color red. One of the first conversations shown is one in which Red sends an image of her face to Doc, which of course has been redacted, to which he replies with compliments as well as making an inappropriate remark. In another, the topic of weird is brought up, with Doc having said the following, quote, you just call it weird because you like fantasizing about being abused and forced against your will. Not only is this a questionable thing to say to somebody, but in his words, it's also a notion he finds to be hot. One of the most infamous screenshot conversations to come out of these chat logs is the one where Doc acknowledges that Red is 12 and how he said he's gonna corrupt her beyond her wildest dreams. As their conversations continued, the two of course would converse in a flirtatious manner, with there being comments about Doc wanting to rape her being shared, as well as jokes saying how Red is gonna be the reason he'll be put behind bars, with Red responding with, quote, you won't end up behind bars if nobody finds out. As previously prefaced, regardless of whether or not Red was reciprocating in the inappropriate messages being shared between the two, Doc was completely out of line speaking with the child this way, and undoubtedly had bad intentions pursuing a charged conversation with the girl who said she was 12. There's of course more chat logs, but for now I'm gonna cease talking about Doc's involvement with Red right here, as I now want to move on and talk about his involvement with Yellow, who once again was 15. Contrary to his conversations with Red, Yellow did not like the way Doc was speaking with her, as he was pretty pushy, especially when he was trying to get her to send her a picture of her face, to which she would always decline. He would insist that he could be trusted not to share any pictures with anyone, and he would continue practically begging for her to send a face pic, questioning her as to why she wouldn't send it. The date on these Discord messages in particular is December 18th, 2017. However, on January 2nd, 2018, Doc sent Yellow a message saying, quote, you don't actually look that bad, implying that somehow he managed to see a picture of how she looked like, to which she replied, quote, I haven't shown you any pictures, so no. To which he would reply with compliments, not giving her a straight answer as to who it could have been. She then expressed how Doc was being inconsiderate of how she feels, saying, quote, because I trusted them and they promised not to send it to anyone, referring to her face picture. Yellow eventually takes a guess as to who it might have been, to which Doc replies, quote, how'd you guess? And this is where he starts implying that it was all a big joke, saying, quote, I did this just to mess with you. Yellow then said she doubts that's what he meant, and Doc also starts downplaying the situation, saying it's no big deal. In the last screenshotted conversation with Yellow available in this document, Doc apologized, saying, quote, whatever, sorry for being so sour, I'll get out of your hair. There's a lot of ground covered in this document, so if you'd like to check all of this out for yourself, it'll be in the pastebin link below along with all of my other sources, but this is where I'm going to be ending my coverage of this first document, as what we just went over highlights the strange and questionable way in which Doc interacted with individuals who said they were minors, not only having said inappropriate things with Red, but also having been pretty pushy to Yellow to reveal her face to him. On September 29th, 2020, Doc took to his YouTube channel to respond to the Google document in a video titled Responding to the Document Allegations, and I now want to talk a bit about what he had to say in said response video. Now, I'm not going to get into absolutely everything addressed in this video, so as we go through his response, we'll keep things concise, mainly focusing on how he addressed his Discord conversations, the ones we previously went over with both Red and Yellow. At around the 23-second mark, Doc starts by apologizing to Red, Blue, and Yellow, and I'm going to let that clip play out for you.
So let me start by apologizing for the things I've said. I know I shouldn't have said those things regardless of the context, and I personally apologize to Red, Blue, and most especially Yellow. I shouldn't have said those things, and I shouldn't have been so pushy to Yellow specifically. I wish the problems could have been resolved, but I can understand why Red and Yellow no longer want to speak to me. If I could take back everything I said, I would. Unfortunately, I can't, so I have to roll with the punches. Moving forward, I will not have this behavior. This shouldn't have been a joke in the first place, and I really apologize. While I will not defend myself for the things I said explicitly, I will protect myself from the blatant attempt at character assassination. For as distasteful as the comments I made are, they weren't genuine, nor were they filled with intent? What was said is absolutely unacceptable, and I know this. I wholeheartedly am not interested in the things I said. Even the document itself recognizes that this isn't evidence of me being a pedophile. However, it'll still go on to push the narrative that I am. My sense of humor has always been very harsh, dark humor, and while it doesn't excuse my behavior, it does reveal that I had no intention on moving on any of the things I said. It was pretty common knowledge that these jokes were being made in my community. Maybe not to the extent it actually occurred, but definitely known. So far as to the point where I was known as the old man with kids in his basement.
From around the 2-minute until the 7-minute mark, several people associated with Doc came onto his video to acknowledge that although what he said throughout the screenshot conversations from the document we went over was wrong, they said that he ultimately wasn't a pedophile and defended him in that regard. Starting from the 7-minute and 34-second mark, he briefly addressed his interactions with Red, and I'm gonna let that play out for you now.
Now for the situation with Red. I agree, I shouldn't have done what I did, and I definitely don't feel right for doing that to her. However, let me make this clear. I did not start her out on this behavior. I did not groom her into doing it. By the time we were making these jokes, she had already been doing it with several people, so the notion that I brought this onto her is utterly false. I will repeat myself as I should because I feel bad for the things I've done to her. I was under the impression that she would feel more comfortable participating in the community because we stopped, but it seems like I was wrong. Red, if you're listening to this or hear this from someone, I want you to know that I'm genuinely sorry for what transpired, regardless of what the video will cover later.
Regardless of whether or not Red was interacting with others in a manner prior to conversing with Doc, the fact that he interacted with her in the way he did, saying things like he's gonna rape her or telling her that she's one of the few who fuels his lust, is absolutely unacceptable dialogue to be having with a child under any circumstances. From the 9-minute 40 until the 11-minute 28-second mark, Doc addressed his interactions with Yellow and also speaks further on his conversations with Red.
To quote, "This victim goes all the way back to 2017, a close friend of the first victim. She will be color-coded as Yellow. There aren't many screenshots of them having interaction, as most of them are either lost or didn't happen in text to begin with. As you saw, there is proof of there being interactions between the two of us in that manner. However, as I said previously, I apologize for being so pushy on you, Yellow. I thought it was funny at the time, as annoying you got a reaction out of you. I'm well aware that I was in the wrong for doing so. However, this is where I must refute the quote-unquote context provided for this particular section. Yes, I did indeed say these things very often to Yellow, but the context seems to imply that it was one-sided. While it's true, I shouldn't have said these things to begin with. She didn't hate it and sometimes would initiate it. Again, I'm not justifying my actions, all I'm doing is disputing what the document says. Now, before we get into some of the other stuff that they mentioned me or anyone else in, I do want to cover a few points I had. On numerous occasions, Red and Yellow reassured multiple people that what was being said was a joke. Red even asked me to clarify whether I was serious or not, and why I do it. At one point, Red had asked me to do something very odd. I know better than to do that, so I played it off, pretending to forget about printing anything or just not having the means to do it. Both Red and Yellow were not only aware of my escapades on hunting scumbags like drug dealers and other scum, but also tried to actively participate in them.
In this section, not only did he reveal that he was also engaging in overtly conversations with Yellow, a fact that wasn't mentioned in the Google document, but also at some point, Red started to question if the things Doc was saying to her were indeed just jokes, and if he enjoyed their inappropriate conversations, a point that came up again later on in his video, specifically at the 31-minute and 35-second mark.
Sometime later that year, she came up to me in DMs and wanted to ask me a personal question. She asked me if I got some kind of enjoyment out of what we did, to which I answered as honestly as I could. I did. Just not for the reasons she thought. I derived no enjoyment from saying those things. It was merely something I did because it fueled my ego.
Okay, so he said that he derives no enjoyment from inherently conversations and that he merely participated in them to fuel his ego. It's crazy that this was his excuse for talking to minors in the way he did. And Doc's response video shows us that he was well aware of the fact that the conversations he was having with the 3 girls, Red, Blue, and Yellow, was completely wrong. And also throughout his video, he tried hiding behind the excuse that everything he said with the girls girls were just jokes, and because he said they were jokes, that's enough to prove that he had no illicit intentions or desires behind his messages. We can all agree that this is a bad response, and although at this point in time there wasn't anything sufficient enough to put him behind bars, without a doubt it was enough to raise a whole lot of eyebrows. In response to Doc's video, the creator of the initial Google document typed up another document, and just like with the first one, there's a lot of ground covered as they responded to a lot of the points he brought up, as well as poking holes in his logic. For brevity, I won't be covering it here, however just know that it definitely doesn't do him any favors and makes him look even worse, as more alleged screenshots of him sending material to minors were leaked. Up until this point of the video, we've been referring to the man behind the screen named DoctorRofatnik by one of his various aliases. So naturally, I think the question as to what Doc's real name is arises, so to find that answer, let's take a look at an article written for Bloomberg which says, quote, Doc claimed to be one of the highest paid developers on Roblox, boasting about it to his community on Discord. There, thousands of his fans who filtered over from Swanaenae clips got to know him as Jaden Shedletsky. He was the California-based younger brother of Roblox legend John Shedletsky, the platform's longtime creative director, or so he said. Doc wasn't John Shedletsky's brother, nor was his name Jaden. His real name was Arnold Castillo, a resident of New Jersey, and he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison after, quote, pleading guilty to transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal activity and coercion and enticement of a minor. According to court documents, from January to May 2022, he went under the alias Jaden Shedletsky to groom a 15-year-old girl who lived in Indiana via Instagram, Roblox, and Discord. He bought the girl lots of things such as drawing tablet, among other equipment, and Castillo, quote, intentionally led the girl to believe that he had the ability to connect her to employment opportunities in the online gaming industry and used this leverage to engage in explicit conversations with her. Castillo coerced and persuaded the girl into believing they were in love and that her family was her enemy. As the conversations between the two continued, Castillo began planning on how he could get the girl from Indiana to his home in New Jersey, and so he settled on ordering an Uber for her, which wound up costing him $1,000. And once the girl arrived at his home, quote, Castillo abused her on multiple occasions and used Uber to have others purchase or attempt to purchase the Plan B pill to prevent the child from becoming pregnant. For days, Castillo kept the girl in his home, abusing her, but 8 days after she was reported missing, FBI agents managed to find her and return her home safely. Meanwhile, Castillo, also known as DoctorRofatnik, is rightfully in prison as we speak, facing the consequences of his actions.